How's it, guys? Welcome back. Ready for chapter 19. I've already poured my tea today. So having some rooibos again. Some rooibos with milk and sugar. Cheers. Oh man. Unforgettable Frank. This chapter always gets me right in the feels. I only had 3 patients left for the day, and I could hear an older lady's voice at reception, issuing orders as though she were a sergeant major. Phyllis must have said something about snakes, because I heard her bark out, "I hate snakes," and then on to some other subject. Now, I'm a bit squeamish about snakes myself. At night time, especially at night time when I can't see them, and when I think there might be one in my bed. But I've always had the opinion that if you leave snakes alone, you won't get much more than a fright now and then. My next patient disturbed my thoughts on serpents and some of my frights. From his charts, I saw he was 20, and yet he had not said a word, and he kept his hand over his mouth. "Afternoon, Frank. My name is Bill. What can I do for you?" All he did was take his hand away from his mouth. His top teeth were sticking straight in such a manner that there was no way he could close his mouth. The maxilla, or upper jaw, was protruding so much that it looked like me when I take a roll of licorice and stick it under my top lip. His top lip was all dry and cracked. "Can you lick your top lip, Frank?" He just shook his head. "So what is it that you want me to do?" He spoke surprisingly well, in spite of his malformation. "I've been to several dentists, and they say that only orthodontics can help me. But I'm now doing my national service, and will be there for 2 years. No way I can afford to have my teeth straightened on army pay. Have they mentioned any alternatives? I always like to find out as much as I can of a patient's past history." "Well, they've talked of pulling my teeth and putting in a plate, but it would not get rid of the bone under my top lip." He sat there fingering the maxilla as though it were a foreign body. "Did they mention anything about removing the bone?" "Oh yes, they all mentioned that. And when they took x-rays, they said that the sinuses were too close to the front." "When's your next call-up?" "Next Monday." "And what are you going to do if I can give you a new look, Frank?" "Well, Doc, I've never had a date. Never even thought a girl would look at me. But my sister is one of your patients, and she told me you could fix me. And she's organized a date for me this weekend, if you can do anything." "Well, you don't give me much time, Frank, but I would like very much for you to have that date. So here's what we're going to do. I'll take some x-rays now. Then I'm going to do impressions so that they can make you a plate. Tomorrow afternoon, about 4, I'll take you to the theater across the way at Pioneer House, and we'll take out 6 of those front teeth. I'm going to have to measure the bone and see how much I can take off, and from the measurements, I'll know how much to take off. It won't be perfect, but you will be able to close your mouth and you will look good. I'll have to grind down your lower teeth because they're biting into your palate right now, so they will be a bit sensitive for a while. The sensitivity will go away after a while, so don't worry about that. You'll have stitches on your top gum, but they too will dissolve by themselves. If I do happen to perforate into a sinus, it won't matter very much because I'll stitch you up tight. Any questions?" "Hey Doc, if you could do that, I'd be the happiest man in town." His hand went up to his mouth again, but I could tell by his eyes he was smiling. "I'll do it on condition that you don't ever put your hand up to your mouth again. Deal?" Frank took his hand away and nodded as he smiled. Judy helped me take the x-rays, do the impressions, get the color of his teeth, and we sent him out the door. He was still smiling, but damn that Judy. She was crying and smiling at the same time. The next patient Judy brought in was a 12-year-old boy. Just a routine checkup. One look and I could tell he hadn't brushed his teeth for a long time. Mother was in the waiting room talking to Phyllis and the sergeant major. So I took a cracker from a tin in the cupboard. With the probe, I scraped off layer after layer of plaque and put it on the cracker. The boy's eyes kept looking down at the cracker every time I smeared plaque on it. After the cracker was totally covered, I sat the chair up and handed it to him. You've had all this crud in your mouth for the past 6 months. You might as well swallow it now. Eat it. He took the cracker and ate it, but I could tell he wasn't too excited about this. However, the look in my eye also told him that he'd better do it, as it was the easier way out. Judy walked him back out to the waiting room. I could hear her talking with the mother. Oh yes, Dr. Taylor did have a chat with him about brushing his teeth, and I'm sure you'll never have a problem with him again, she said, smiling the whole time. I was staring out the window at the crows wheeling and diving around the radio tower. Down in the alley between the old Mutual building and the Pioneer House, a man is having an argument with a woman. I was in a deep reverie when a bark brought me quickly back. You stand there gazing out the window, and I can hardly eat. My gums are so sore from these damned dentures, she barked. I looked at the chart and then looked at the little lady. She was one of those people you just had to look at for a while. Skin like a prune that had been tanned. Completely white hair. Her nose was a little too close to her chin, which gave her a witchy look, and also told me what the problem was with her dentures without me even looking. Beady little black eyes, a nose that spoke of a drink or two in the past, a narrow forehead and eyes a bit too close together. Now when I see a female elephant like that in the bush, with the narrow forehead and eyes close together, I start to run even before she sees me. They are the meanest tempered animals alive, and it seems their aim in life is to torment people like me. So even before I had introduced myself, I wanted out. Good afternoon, Mrs. Skinner. My name is Bill. I can see that you are having denture problems. These things have never been right. Out of her handbag, she pulls a little plastic bag that's full of dentures. Look at this. Look at this. A lot of them. None of them right. Just a waste of money. I thought of my friend Dr. Tom Morrison, the Irish dentist, who was always playing tricks on me, and who had a very similar nose to Mrs. Skinner's. Haven't you heard of Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Skinner? He works miracles with dentures, you know. While I was talking to her, I remembered her comment about snakes, and out of my half-open briefcase, I surreptitiously slipped a large rubber snake and dropped it next to the chair. At the same time, I jumped and let out a yell. Mrs. Skinner looked down, and from a sitting position, levitated straight up into the air, still in a sitting position. When she landed, her legs were already going like pistons, down the hall and into the waiting room. Phyllis, my dear, do me a favor quickly. Go get my handbag in that dentist's surgery. I left it there. Judy was already taking it down the hall. And Phyllis, where is that lovely Dr. Morrison's office? My shoes were already off. A cup of tea was waiting for me in my office on the desk. Judy and Phyllis had been holding it in until they heard Mrs. Skinner leave in the elevator, and then the hooting and shrieking began. I had a smug look on my face, and even though snakes have given me a fright now and then, I was grateful that I had left them alone. Most of the time. My thoughts were mostly on Frank all of the following day. The dental lab was right across the passage from my surgery, so I spent time there too, making sure the denture was the way I wanted it. By 4 o'clock, I had measured the x-rays, and on a second model taken from the impression, I had taken a high-speed drill, and with the measurements I had taken, did a practice run on the stone model. Having never done an operation like this before, I was quite excited. I figured there was certainly nothing lost in trying, and if it were a success, then I'd really won. After Frank was anesthetized, I took out the front 6 teeth, then took a scalpel and made an incision right along the crest of the protruding bone. I peeled back the gum on both sides of the ridge, and then took the high-speed drill and made one cut into the bone, all along the ridge, shaving off the bone. When I'd gone in the desired length, I cleaned it all up and tapped all along the front. And even though the x-rays showed the sinuses to be close, from the ringing of the bone, I thought I could take off even a little more. So I took off another couple millimeters of bone. I took the scalpel again and made a straight incision on the front flap of gum, and then matched it as well as I could to the flap on the palatal side, which I had also trimmed up into a straight line. Using fine sutures, I put the stitches about 3 millimeters apart, right across the front. The lower teeth then had to be shortened, and even though he was asleep, I could close his jaw and see that there was clearance. Now for the moment of truth. The anesthetist and his assistant were there. Judy and the theatre assistant were there. Old Tom Morrison and another one of his dentist friends with their assistants were all there. I took a deep breath and slipped the plastic denture into place. I didn't even have to look at Frank. I just looked at Judy. Her hands were over her mouth and she was squealing like a schoolgirl, as was the theatre assistant. I had one other patient to do and then went back to the recovery room, where I knew that Frank would have awakened by now. I peeked around the corner and there he was with a hand mirror. He was smiling at himself. He would lick his top lip between smiles. Blood was oozing from the corners of his mouth, but he didn't seem to mind. "Well, what do you think, Frank?" "Oh, you're lucky you're not a girl, Doc, or I'd kiss you." He looked at himself again and kept smiling at himself. "I want to know all about your date this weekend. You take care, Frank." "Thanks again, Doc. And look, no hand to my mouth." April is a wonderful month in Zimbabwe. The weather is perfect, the trees have a full canopy of leaves after the rains, and the wild fruit trees are bearing. I had some wild plums on my dashboard as I was heading for Buck's ranch in the Guai Valley. He had taken a consignment of baby elephants to Germany, and he had asked me to look after his place while he was away. Working on his place was a constant stream of happiness, besides all the wildlife. I had just crossed the Bembezi River and was climbing the hill on the northern side when suddenly I sensed danger. Strangely enough, the shepherd's song started to go through my mind. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I reached over to the passenger window and flipped the lever of my mounted FN onto automatic fire. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." I take 2 grenades out of the canvas sack next to me on the seat and put them between my legs. "He restoreth my soul." I flipped the lever of the FN on my side to rapid fire. Then it was that I saw cattle being driven into the road from both sides by unseen men. It was a trick often used by the gooks, the terrorists, to slow down traffic so that their ambushes would be more effective. Here we go, I thought. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I reach over to the passenger weapon and hold the trigger down. 20 rounds spit out in a single second. I fire a double tap from the FN in my window, and then, jerking the pin out of a grenade with my teeth, I throw it hard out of the window, closely followed by the second. By the time they have exploded, I've already emptied the magazine on the FN on my side and changed magazines. I'm shooting blindly, keeping my eyes on the road, my foot flat and hoping for a miracle. I've always believed in the proverb that bullshit baffles brains. Therefore, the more noise you make coming into an ambush, the less chance there is of being hit. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Bullets are cracking overhead. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I aim my vehicle for a small gap in the herd of cattle. At the last split second, they moved just enough to let my vehicle through at 100 kilometers an hour, brushing the backside of a cow on the left side and denting the fender with the head of another on the right. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemies. The cracking isn't as heavy now, and men are running, disappearing into the bush. I give a couple more shots in that direction, and then quickly change magazines in both FNs. Take out 2 more grenades and put them between my legs. I'm ready for the next ambush. I drive on without slowing down, trying to recall the rest of the psalm. My tongue feels a chip in the corner of my front tooth, a feeling that comes out every time I pull pins with my teeth. War is a bitch. The 5 days at Buck's place were magical, definitely restoring of my soul. Nothing could hurt me. No one could have bothered me. I was ready for any kind of patient, and was also looking forward to spending some time with people again. When I came into the office, Phyllis looked like a thunderstorm. She jerked her thumb towards my office, and I went in to find Judy and Frank's sister there, holding each other. Red, teary eyes and tissues held to the nose. Frank's sister came over and hugged me tightly, and I just held her. She couldn't say anything, but didn't have to. I could already see it. Through her sobs, she managed to get a few words out. He wanted to tell you that he had a good date. Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, that chapter always gets me. It's heavy. And the worst part is that, all those boys and young men that died in that Rhodesian bush war died for nothing. We were abandoned by the rest of the world, and Mugabe and his terrorists took over the country anyway, ran it into the ground. All that fighting, all that for nothing, just because of global politics and the United Nations, of course. Anyway, thanks guys. Have a good night. Sleep well. And I'll check you tomorrow for the next chapter. Cheers.